This is the hour, the darkest place. Dante's Inferno, the devil's maze. It's a good world, good world gone bad.
Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant. I'm delighted to introduce you to Etheline Staley. We are at Staley-Wise Gallery in Soho, which is très chic. But forget about that. It's the work that surrounds us. An extraordinary collection of mid-century and later fashion photography, Avedon, Pens, Stern, Horst P. Horst right behind us. The reason why, in particular, Horst P. Horst's Mainbocher Corset is so interesting is because you find an homage to this very image in Madonna's famous video, Vogue. But you have a story about that, don't you?
Many years ago, at an art fair, we had that photograph, and Staley-Wise had a booth at the art fair, and Madonna came by. This was a long time ago. And she, rather than put it as an homage to Horst and the corset, she pretty much said, look what I did for that photograph. That's how she got to be Madonna.
You know, it takes a certain level of ambition.
Of ego.
Yeah, absolutely true. And the fact of the matter is that she brought that image to so many more people than would have seen it otherwise.
Well, she had a point. I was a stylist for many years.
Were you?
And my partner, Tacky Wise, was also a stylist and an editor. And in 1981, some friends were taking a loft down in Soho to be a stock photo library. And they said, why don't you take a corner of this loft and have a gallery, thinking we'd show their pictures. But since our background was fashion, we made a list of artists that we wanted to represent. And since no one had done it before, everybody was more than willing. And that's how we started with a Horst exhibition. December 1981.
And how did you come to these photographers? I mean, you just said...
They were it. That's who they were. And that we made a list.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And they were willing. They got less willing as they got more famous. I mean, we caught on right away. We got a big article in the Arts and Leisure section.
The Times.
In the Times, right away. And, you know, other galleries have picked up on fashion. There was just now opened at the Getty in Los Angeles a huge exhibition of fashion photography.
My sister just came back from visiting that very exhibit.
Did she like it?
She loved it.
We were big lenders to it.
Wow.
It was fun to do. We were there. We went to the opening.
It's probably a terrible thing to ask, but do you have any favorites?
No.
Good answer. Really, this is the creme de la creme.
Thank you
of
for
fashion.
that. Thank you.
It's just, if you're in New York, if you're within 100 miles of, if you're within 200 miles, if you're within 3 hours of New York, to come to this gallery it's like a pilgrimage. I am looking at more than a dozen of the greatest fashion photographs ever taken. That's what we're looking at here. Etheline, thank you so much.
A pleasure.
For having us come in just on a whim. Really just wonderful, wonderful gallery, guys. Staley-Wise, 100 Crosby Street in Soho. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time. Did you stop it?
You were supposed to ask.
Oh, you're already recording. Did I tell you she does this?
Oh, good.
She does this. She does this. Did you say anything embarrassing in that?
No.
No, no.
Not yet.
So we're back.
We're good.
There are a couple of stories that you must tell, please.
Well, we knew Horst very well, and when we started our gallery, he didn't know us from Adam, but we went and we sat in his apartment. We came and we sat there, and we came and we sat there, and finally he got sick of seeing us, and he said, okay, you can have the show.
Bert Stern and Stanley Kubrick.
They started out together as photographers. In fact, I don't even think Bert was a photographer yet at Look magazine when they were kids, and became good friends. And when Lolita was being shot, Bert came to do the publicity photographs and brought those heart-shaped glasses with him that he bought for 50 cents.
The thing about photography, the thing about art, is the way one medium informs another, and how the relationships are actually so central to everything that happens. There is no, I think, and maybe you disagree with me and we can have that discussion, but I think there is no objective standard for what makes art amazing. It's a relationship between the work and the person consuming it, seeing it, hearing it,
Also the
touching
time, the history, what's going on in the world, it's all in the photographs. Whether they mean to have it or not, it's all there.
They always capture the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I love that word.
I was going to say it, but I didn't.
Oh, you didn't think I would know what it meant. I understand. Again, Etheline, what a pleasure, what a joy.
Come back.
What a find.
Come back.
You know what? We will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, instead of asking you to hold so many thoughts, this time I held them for you. That's because I know what it's like to hold too many thoughts at once. I mean, I make my head hurt, and once or twice, I swear I could almost smell smoke. In any case, there are half a dozen or so additional things I wanted to share with you about Horst and Mainbocher Corset as just one small example of how much there is to see and know, how much we can learn, how much juice we can extract out of life, how much there is to truly understand, appreciate, and inform our opinions and actions if only we take the time to do so. So, here we go. I'll make it quick. Whether you pronounce it Mainbocher, Mainbocher, or Mainbocher, each has its adherents. The Paris fashion designer, the man who created the corset which Horst's model wore, and he photographed along the Champs-Élysées for Vogue Paris in August 1939, a man named, and I don't know I have this right either, Main Rousseau Bochet, was actually an American born in Chicago. It's worth making a couple of points here. Names can be powerful. Names are often imbued with subtle meaning or accompanied by fascinating origin stories that we ignore or fail to explore to our own detriment. And migration, emigration, immigration, the movement of people across national boundaries has always been a critical component of the richest and fullest expression of humanity. Just as in the story of Horst P. Horst, who was actually born Horst Paul Albert Bormann in Germany in 1906. Now, as it turns out, Horst would come to have the misfortune of sharing the same last name with a guy named Martin Bormann, Adolf Hitler's secretary. So when Horst moved to the US in 1939, right after the shoot, more on that in a moment, he changed his last name to avoid just such an association. Horst went on to enlist in the US Army and served as an Army photographer for the United States in World War II. Now, the winds of war profoundly informed this most famous of all Horst photographs. I mean, how could they not? The Nazi threat in 1939 was clear and imminent when he shot the image that summer. Less than a year later, France would surrender to the Nazis after the Battle of France. Horst said of this image, I quote, "It was created by emotion. It was the last photograph I, Horst, took in Paris before the war. I left the studio at 4 a.m., went back to the house, picked up my bags, and caught the 7 a.m. train to Le Havre to board the Normandy. The photograph is peculiar for me. While I was taking it, I was thinking of all that I was leaving behind." End quote. In other words, as Etheline mentioned, and not only do I wholeheartedly agree, but will amplify here, photographs are uniquely powerful in capturing the zeitgeist, which, in this case, includes the fact that the final image, as it appeared in Vogue, was airbrushed. Today we'd call it Photoshop because that's how we do it with a digital workflow, to bring the corset in a little tighter than the image Horst composed and shot. It was a little too suggestive for the magazine in its original form. This story represents a fascinating intersection of war, sexuality, values, a cautionary tale, and now I'm not talking about the photograph, for all of us about the perils of hubris, in assuming there is only one right way or that anyone has a monopoly on the truth, or the hubris of forgetting about the costs of war to winners and losers, though, as a former North Vietnamese soldier says in Ken Burns' documentary Vietnam, and I quote again, "In wars, there are not winners or losers, there's only destruction." Of course, there's room to argue the facts, but I think less room to argue the sentiment. The thing is, Horst specifically composed the shot with the corset loose on one side. He said, I'll quote again, "I had left it open because it captured the mood of France in 1939, the idea of escape. It represented," he repeated, "escaping Paris, the inevitability of war." Now, let me close on less of a downbeat. It's not just the broader contemporaneous history of that summer I find so fascinating, but the history of Horst's youth as well. And in that history, finding once again the influence of one artistic medium on another, the power of travel, the power of connection, and the power of study. Not only did Horst leave the Hamburg Kunstgewerbeschule as a young man to study under Bauhaus architect Le Corbusier, right? But it is said that he was influenced by Man Ray's 1924 Violon d'Ingres, and by extension at least, Man Ray's debt to Jean-Auguste-Dominique Ingres' 1808 oil on canvas, the Valpinçon Bather, which he, Ingres, in turn, painted while a student in Rome. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation in the comments section below. You guys are just so sharp and so generous. Just wow. Share, create a playlist, consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, or making a contribution directly via the PayPal link down below. As always, we thank you for it. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time.